So we are in First Samuel chapter 17, and it's the famous David and Goliath story.
Oh, yeah.
This is a long chapter, let me tell you.
Yes.
It's one chapter, but it's a long one.
Yes.
We'll probably do a couple more chapters after that. But it's so just to keep in line with what we've been doing, the line of kings started with Saul. Before that, they had judges, and so we have Saul. Saul is the king now. We've only had a couple chapters with the line of kings, and we talked about last week that the line of kings was established because the people didn't want to listen to God anymore. They they wanted to listen to people, and people other nations had kings, and they wanted kings too. So they decided that they wanted a king, and God said, well, okay, be careful what you wish for. And so we've had Saul, and we've also had David's. I don't know if David was officially anointed, but to a certain degree, David. Oh yeah, he was anointed as king in the previous chapter.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So and he's from Bethlehem, which is where we get the line of kings that goes through to Jesus. So I'm gonna go it. I'm assuming.
Yeah. David, wasn't he actually officially anointed by Samuel at his father's house?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and that Samuel was worried about a problem if he came there, and God said, no, you just say you've come to make a sacrifice to the Lord.
Yeah, and he was trying to figure out
Uh-huh.
which son it was going to be, and the youngest one, David, was out in the field with the.
Yep. But all of the sons passed by, and God said no until David came in.
Yeah.
Okay.
It reminds me a little bit of the story of Joseph, because you remember Joseph was what was the story where Joseph, before the issue with him being thrown in the pit, he was out in the field and his brothers all were there, and there was something about that too, which is similar.
It was about the coat of many colors, wasn't it? And then Joseph had a dream that that about a bunch of stacks of wheat would bow down to one in the middle or something, and his brothers became extremely jealous.
Yep.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's always the youngest one.
Yep.
So beginning of chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle. They were gathered at Socoh, which belongs to Judah, and encamped between Socoh and Azekah in Ephes Damim. Saul and the Israelites gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and formed ranks against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. There came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. I don't know what 6 cubits is, but must be.
My book says that he was over 9 feet tall.
Wow. 6 cubits and a span. Verse 4. Almost 10 feet tall. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
6'9". He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had greaves of bronze on his legs and a javelin of bronze between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, and his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, "Today I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. I know it's kind of a good plan, not have everybody chance to die, but just one.
Yeah.
Now David was the son of a Ephrathite of Bethlehem in Judah named Jesse, who had 8 sons. In the days of Saul, the man was already old and advanced in years. The 3 eldest sons of Jesse had followed Saul to the battle. The names of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab the firstborn, the next to him Aminadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, the 3 eldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days, the Philistines came forward and took a stand morning and evening. 40 days came up there too, that's interesting. Jesse said to his son David, take for your brothers an ephah of this parched grain and these 10 loaves, and carry them quickly to the camp to your brothers. Also take these 10 cheeses to the commander of their 1,000. See how your brothers fare and bring some token from them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. David rose early. They're fighting now. I didn't think they were fighting. Anyway, David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, took the provisions, and went as Jesse had commanded him. He came to the encampment as the army was going forth to the battle line, shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines drew up for battle, army against army. David left the things in charge of the keeper of the baggage, ran to the ranks, and went and greeted his brothers. As he talked with them, the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, came up out of the ranks of the Philistines and spoke the same words as before, and David heard him. All the Israelites, when they saw the man, fled from him, were very much afraid. The Israelites said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. The king will greatly enrich the man who kills him and will give him his daughter and make his family free in Israel. David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and take away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? The people answered him in the same way, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. His eldest brother Eliab heard him talking to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David. He said, why have you come down? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down just to see the battle. David said, what have I done now? It was only a question. He turned away from him toward another and spoke in the same way. And the people answered him again as before. When the words that David spoke were heard, they repeated them before Saul, and he sent for him. David said to Saul, let no one's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine. Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are just a boy, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep sheep for his father, and whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I went after it and struck it down, rescuing the lamb from its mouth. And if it turned against me, I would catch it by the jaw, strike it down, and kill it. Your servant has killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, since he has defied the armies of the living God. David said, the Lord who saved me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will save me from the hand of this Philistine. So Saul said to David, go, and may the Lord be with you. Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. David strapped Saul's sword over the armor, and he tried in vain to walk, for he was not used to them. Then David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I am not used to them. So David removed them. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the wadi, and put them in his shepherd's bag in the pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. The Philistine came on and drew near to David with his shield bearer in front of him. When the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and handsome in appearance. The Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air, to the wild animals of the field. But David said to the Philistine, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Wow, that's pretty cocky of him to.
Yes, it is.
uh,
Because I remember when he was anointed that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in full force.
yeah.
Okay.
So, but that's pretty. He's taunting. He's taunting the giant.
Mm-hmm.
When the
Yes.
when the Philistine
Still.
ran nearer to meet David, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, slung it, and struck the Philistine on his forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David prevailed over a Philistine with a sling and a stone, striking down the Philistine and killing him. And there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine. He grasped his sword, drew it out of its sheath, and killed him, and he cut off his head with it. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they fled. The troops of Israel and Judah rose up with a shout and pursued the Philistines as far as Gath and the gates of Ekron, so that the wounded Philistines fell on the way from Sharim as far as Gath and Ekron. The Israelites came back from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their camp. David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. When Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this young man? Abner said, As your soul lives, O king, I do not know. The king said, Inquire whose son this stripling is. On David's return from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. Saul said to him, Whose son are you, young man? And David answered, I am the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. I didn't realize that that was the very first story about David other than his anointing. Comes pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. It's a weird question to me, but I wonder whose sword he used to cut off his head, because remember he didn't take the sword with him. And if he used Goliath's sword, then it said that his sword was extremely heavy. So unless
but he would have been a sturdy boy.
yeah, but he was still a boy.
Tending the sheep, but as I understood, he took Goliath's sword and
Yeah.
cut off his head with his own sword.
Yeah, it's not totally clear there in verse 51, but I was just wondering, curious. Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually kind of love his rationale. He says, I've killed lions and bears. What's a man?
Uh-huh.
If I can defend the sheep from lions and bears, I can certainly handle him.
Yeah.
Okay, we will continue on with David.
Okay.
When David had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was bound to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan then stripped himself of the robe he was wearing and gave it to David and his armor, and even his sword and his bow and his belt. David went out. I'm trying to remember who Jonathan was.
Jonathan was Saul's son.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've read ahead.
David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. As a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. As they were coming home, when David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out of all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing, to meet King Saul, with the tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very angry, for the saying displeased him. He said, They have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day on. The next day, an
Oh,
evil.
Yeah, Dan,
Yeah.
my version claims, and from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, that's good.
I thought that makes a lot more sense
Yeah,
to
for
me.
sure. For sure.
Okay,
The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, as he did by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Wow, he's so mad he wants to kill David. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And David marched out and came in leading the army. David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he had a great success, he stood in awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for it was he who marched out and came in leading them. Then Saul said to David, Here is my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. Saul is so bipolar. He tries to kill him in one turn, and then he's offering his daughter in marriage.
sounds like it.
Yeah. For Saul thought, I will not raise a hand against him, let the Philistines deal with him. David said to Saul, Who am I and who are my kinsfolk, my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But at the time when Saul's daughter Merab should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel the Meholathite as a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, Saul was told, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, Let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, You shall now be my son-in-law. Saul commanded his servants, Speak to David in private and say, See, the king is delighted with you, and all his servants love you. Now then become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants reported these words to David in private. And David said, Does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and of no repute? The servants of Saul told him, This is what David said. Then Saul said, This you shall say to David, the king desires no marriage present except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. 100 foreskins seems like an interesting wedding gift, but
Yes.
When his servant told David these words, David was well pleased to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David rose and went along with his men and killed 100 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle. As often as they came out, David had more success than all the servants of Saul, so that his fame became very great. So no matter how much Saul tries to get David to be killed by the Philistines, it never works. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, this intrigue reminds me of the stuff that seems to be going on today in our own world.
Yeah. People tend to be against each other with just for personality reasons, not for anything that helps the people. There's no reason that Saul should dislike David other than David's a good soldier, which is what he wants, right? So it's interesting. Saul spoke with his son Jonathan and with all his servants about killing David, but Saul's son Jonathan took great delight in David. Jonathan told David, My father Saul is trying to kill you. Therefore be on guard tomorrow morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are, and I will speak to my father about you. If I learn anything, I will tell you. Jonathan spoke well of David to his father Saul, saying to him, the king should not sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have been of good service to you. For he took his life in his hand when he attacked the Philistine, and the Lord brought about a great victory for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against an innocent person by killing David without cause? Saul heeded the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. So Jonathan called David and related all these things to him. Jonathan then brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. That's twice that David had to leave, get away from Saul because Saul was trying to kill him.
Mhm.
But he's back after twice leaving. And then the next thing is Michael helps David escape from Saul. So it's constantly going back and forth. He can't trust Saul. He works for Saul, but he can't trust him. Again, there was a war, and David went out to fight with the Philistines. He launched a heavy attack on them so that they fled before him. Then an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul again, as he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, while David was playing music. Saul sought to pin David to the wall with his spear, but he eluded Saul, so he struck the spear into the wall. David fled and escaped that night. That's the second time he's tried to do that, too.
Mm-hmm.
Saul sent messengers to David's house to keep watch over him, planning to kill him in the morning. David's wife, Michal, told him, if you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed. So Michal, I lost my spot for a second, told him, so Michal let David down through the window. He fled away and escaped. Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed. She put a net of goat's hair on its head and covered it with the clothes. When Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, he is sick. Then Saul sent the messengers to see David for themselves. He said, bring him up to me in the bed that I may kill him. When the messengers came in, the idol was in the bed with a covering of goat's hair on its head. Saul said to Michal, why have you deceived me like this and let my enemy go so that he has escaped? Michal answered Saul, he said to me, let me go. Why should I kill you? Huh.
Hmm.
So it's such an interesting relationship, right? Because David's done nothing wrong, but Saul just dislikes him because he's successful in what he does, and because he's become very popular. Now David fled and escaped.
Doesn't Saul by this time realize that God has withdrawn his favor to Saul?
You'd
And is
think
that his why?
you'd think he would realize that, but it's almost like he doesn't.
Yeah.
And you know, the other thing about this is the way kingship gets changed is usually from being either it's the child of the king or it's defeated in battle. So
Yeah.
meaning Saul has no plans of not being king. He's going to stay safe and behind the lines and not worry about not being king. It's like he doesn't care whether he's not anointed with God and by God anymore, because there's no succession plan, right?
Okay. And back in that time, weren't evil spirits what we now consider mental illness?
Very often, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, if it says evil spirits came upon him and he threw the spear, it could be something like that. Yeah.
There's Judy.
Here's Judy. Well,
Good morning, Judy.
Good
here's
morning.
Judy.
It was canceled. I read something that said it was canceled today, the Bible study. Sorry, I got in so late.
I did, unless that something got changed. It shouldn't have been.
Oh,
No problem. We are in 1 Samuel 19 and about to start verse 18.
thank you.
Just missed David slaying Goliath.
Oh dear, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Cutting off his head. And since then, we've been talking about how even though Saul appointed David as a general for him and gave him his daughter in marriage, Saul really wants to kill David and goes through these times when multiple times now he has tried to kill David and David would kind of run away. And then Saul has sort of apologized and said, okay, no, I won't try to kill him. And then he comes back. And I think 3 times now that's happened. So David has just run away again because Saul was trying to kill him after he has already married his daughter. So we are in chapter 19, verse 18 right now.
Okay.
Now David fled and escaped. He came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. He and Samuel went and settled at Naioth. Saul was told, David is at Naioth in Ramah. Then Saul sent messengers to take David. When they saw the company of the prophets in a frenzy with Samuel standing in charge of them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also fell into a prophetic frenzy. When Saul was told, he sent other messengers, and they also fell into a frenzy. Saul sent messengers again the 3rd time, and they also fell into a frenzy. Well, that's interesting. The people that he's sending to take David away suddenly collapse in this prophetic frenzy thing, and it can't take David. It's interesting. Then he himself went to Ramah. He came to the great well that is in Seku. He asked, where are Samuel and David? And someone said, they are at Naioth and Ramah. He went there toward Naioth and Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon them. As he was going, he fell into a prophetic frenzy until he came to Naioth and Ramah. He too stripped his clothes, and he too fell in a frenzy before Samuel. He lay naked all that day and all that night. Therefore it is said, is Saul also among the prophets. It's an interesting way for the Lord to keep people from killing him, just make them writhe in prophetic frenzy, whatever that means.
Yeah, whatever that means.
Apparently take off all your clothes and writhe on the ground.
Yeah. In my version, NIV calls it prophesying, but I don't know what it means by that.
Well, prophetic frenzy, it's something really, yeah, I don't know either.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of some what do they call them? Churches. The churches that have Pentecostal churches, sometimes they do that sort of writhing of spirits and stuff. I wonder if that's what it is, but that's interesting. So they can't capture or kill David because they get, once they get close, they writhe on the ground without their clothes, and even Saul did that. That's really funny. The Lord is doing all sorts of things to protect David. Okay. David, so chapter 20, David fled from Naioth in Ramah. He came before Jonathan and said, what have I done? What is my guilt? And what is my sin against your father that he is trying to take my life? He said to him, far from it, you shall not die. My father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? Never. But David also swore, your father knows well that you like me, and he thinks, do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, there is but a step between me and death. Then Jonathan said to David, whatever you say, I will do for you. David said to Jonathan, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit with the king at the meal. But let me go so that I may hide in the field until the 3rd evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the family. If he says good, it will be well with your servant, but if he is angry, then know that evil has been determined by him. Therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a sacred covenant with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself. Why should you bring me to your father? Jonathan said, far be it from you. If I knew that it was decided by my father that evil should come upon you, why would I not tell you? Then David said to Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you harshly? Jonathan replied to David, come, let us go out into the field. So they both went out into the field. So he's trying to use Jonathan to find out if it's safe to come back. I think a fourth time now. Keeps coming back. Jonathan said to David, by the Lord, the God of Israel, when I have sounded out my father about the time tomorrow or on the third day, if he is well disposed toward David, shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But if my father intends to do you harm, the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away, so that you may go in safety. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. If I am still alive, show me the faithful love of the Lord. But if I die, never cut off your faithful love from my house, even if the Lord were to cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. Thus Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord seek out the enemies of David. Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, and he loved him as he loved his own life. They are very, very close, these two. Jonathan and David. Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon. You will be missed because your place will be empty. On the day after tomorrow, you shall go a long way down. Go to the place where you hid yourself earlier and remain beside the stone there. I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it as though I shot at a mark. Then I will send the boy saying, go find the arrows. If I say to the boy, look, the arrows are on this side of you, collect them. Then you are to come, for as the Lord lives, it is safe for you and there's no danger. But if I say to the young man, look, the arrows are beyond you, then go, for the Lord has sent you away. As to the matter about which you and I have spoken, the Lord is witness between you and me forever. So he's trying to figure out how to tell David whether it's safe to come back without specifically going to him. So David hid himself in the field. When the new moon came, the king sat at the feast to eat. The king sat upon his seat as at other times, upon the seat by the wall. Jonathan stood while Abner sat by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, something has befallen him. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty, and Saul said to his son Jonathan, why has the son of Jesse not come to the feast either yesterday or today? Jonathan answered Saul, David earnestly asked me leave of you to go to Bethlehem. He said, let me go, for our family is holding a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your sight, let me get away and see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan. He said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Wow.
Wow.
You son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? For as long as the son of Jesse lives upon the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Now send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. Then Jonathan answered his father Saul, why should he be put to death? What has he done? But Saul threw his spear at him to strike him, so Jonathan knew that it was the decision of his father to put David to death. Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food on the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David and because his father had disgraced him. In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him was a little boy. He said to the boy, run and find the arrows that I shoot. And the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. When the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called after the boy and said, is the arrow not beyond you? Jonathan called after the boy, hurry, be quick, do not linger. So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing, only Jonathan and David knew the arrangement. Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said to him, go and carry them to the city. As soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and prostrated himself with his face to the ground. He bowed 3 times, and they kissed each other and wept with each other. David wept the more. Then Jonathan said to David, go in peace, since both of us have sworn in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. He got up and left, and Jonathan went into the city. So we'll do a bit more, but it's interesting that they have this whole system to try to figure out, well, David is invited to this feast, but Saul still wants to use that invitation as an opportunity to kill David. So David's not too keen on coming back. It's such a weird relationship because Saul wanted David to be his general, but at the same time is jealous of how popular David is. So chapter 21. I don't want to miss too much if she's on a phone call, but David came to Nob to the priest Ahimelech. Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" David said to the priest Ahimelech, "The king has charged me with a matter and said to me, no one must know anything of the matter about which I send you and with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what have you at hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever is here." The priest answered David, "I have no ordinary bread at hand, only holy bread, provided that the young men have kept themselves from women." David answered the priest, "Indeed, women have been kept from us as always when I go on expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy even when it is a common journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread. There was no bread there except the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord, to be replaced by hot bread on the day it is taken away. So he's being given essentially communion bread. I mean, not the same as the communion, but bread of sanctified bread from a temple, not the temple, but a temple, a holy place. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord. His name was Doeg the Edomite, the chief of Saul's shepherds. David said to Ahimelech, "Is there no spear or sword here with you? I did not bring my sword or my weapons with me because the king's business required haste." The priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, who you killed in the valley of Elah, is here, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you will take that, take it, for there is none here except that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." Wow, somehow the sword that he used to kill Goliath ended up being in that same place. And he needs a sword for whatever he's doing. All he's doing is running away from Saul, and lying about it. Although that, I mean, I'm not saying that's not a good thing in this particular case, but he says, "Oh no, I'm on an errand for the king. I'm not running away from the king."
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't have any supplies because this required speed, so I didn't bring any food or weapons or anything while I do this errand for the king, even though he's not really doing an errand from the king. David rose and fled that day from Saul. He went to King Achish of Gath. The servants of Achish said to him, "Is not this David the king of the land? Is this not David the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s." David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of King Achish of Gath. So he changed his behavior before them. He pretended to be mad when in their presence. Mad is crazy, right? He scratched marks on the doors of the gate and let his spittle run down his beard. Achish said to his servant, "Look, you see the man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen that you have brought this fellow to play the madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house?" He made them afraid of him by acting crazy.
Mhm.
I'm assuming this is not an Israelite king. It's probably some other king.
Yeah.
So David left there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and all his father's house heard of it, they went down there to him. Everyone who was in distress and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to him, and he became captain over them. Those who were with him numbered about 400. David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. He said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother come to you until I know what God will do for me." He left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not remain in the stronghold, leave and go into the land of Judah." So David left and went into the forest of Hereth. Saul heard that David.
Excuse me, Dan, it said that this Achish, the king of Gath, was that also not where Goliath came from?
Was from Gath. Yeah, I think so.
Yes, okay. So
Yeah,
he wasn't Hebrew. He
And
was,
it's interesting that he's carrying Goliath's sword too when he comes there. So, yeah, right. Yeah, it's hard. It's so one of the things about this that makes it hard is the lines are blurry as to who's who.
Yeah,
When it helps to know that a city is Philistine or Israelite or otherwise, but it doesn't always tell you exactly. Gath, was he in the? Yeah, so we don't know Adullam, for instance. We don't know Nob. Sometimes there's hints, but not always. So, sort of interesting to sort of figure out. But I'm assuming the people that first read this story would have known a little better what the different nations were. And remember, they also changed. There's so many times that a city would be taken by the Israelites and was later taken back by the Philistines. And at one, depending on the time in the history, it could be either one in some cases. So verse 6 here. Saul heard that David and those who were with him had been located. Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height, with a spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing around him. Saul said to his servants who stood around him, "Hear now, you Benjaminites. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a league with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as he is doing today." Well, he's getting paranoid at this point. How come all of you people that haven't helped me out to defeat David? Are you all against me? Doeg the Edomite, who was in charge of Saul's servants, answered, "I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub. He inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine." The king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and for all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob. And all of them came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." He answered, "Here I am, my lord." Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, by giving him bread and a sword, and by inquiring of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait as he is doing today?" Interesting, because remember, David went to that same guy to say, I'm doing something for the king," which was a lie. And now the king is figuring out what David has been up to, trying to follow him, trying to catch him. Then Ahimelech answered the king, "Who among all your servants is so faithful as David? He is the king's son-in-law and is quick to do your bidding and is honored in your house. Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? By no means. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant or to any member of my father's house. Your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little." The king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." The king said to the guard who stood around him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David. They knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me." But the servants of the king would not raise their hand to attack the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, "You, Doeg, turn and attack the priest." Doeg the Edomite turned and attacked the priest. On that day he killed 85 who wore the linen ephod. Wow.
Yeah.
Ew.
Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword men and women, children, infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep. He put to the sword. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priest of the Lord. David said to Abiathar, I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I am responsible for the lives of all at your father's house. Stay with me and do not be afraid, for the one who seeks my life seeks your life. You will be safe with me. Wow. Saul doesn't care so much that he'll even kill the priests, even though it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Saul is like crazy with envy, with paranoia.
Sounds like Adolf Hitler.
Kinda, yeah.
And like some of the Oriental ones that we've got in the Middle East as well as on the
Mhm.
true Orient that we're dealing with today.
Yeah, they can't, you can't, there's no way to reason with Saul, is the thing.
Uh,
Like multiple people have tried to reason with him. What, isn't David a good guy? What has David ever done to you? And yet Saul still wants to kill him, and will kill anybody who else who helps him. I kind of want to finish. No, we'll continue next week. There's no way I'm going to finish this part of the story. There's quite a bit left here, so
mhm.
we will call that a day at the end of 22, the beginning of 23. I will mark my Bible study and then we'll pray and have a good rest of the day. Chapter 23. Okay. A little bit more about David. Actually, we're going to have chapters and chapters and chapters and books and books. The story of David goes for a while. So, but that's good. Let us pray. Dear Lord, thank you for the stories of your people, that even great leaders have some of the same failings that we have jealousy and anger, and go through the same motions that the heroes of the Bible struggle sometimes. Thank you for the stories of your people. As we grow and learn about their stories, help us grow and learn more about you and your love and care for us. All this in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.